Okay, let's start. Welcome to our online seminar introducing the US market to you. Thank you for taking the time to your lunch break, basically, to join us to learn more about the US market, and thank you for your interest. We have a couple of guys from the US joining us very early in the morning for them, but they had their first cup of coffee, so they should be okay. We're going to give you a short introduction, and we hope to give you also some insights that you might need to consider before entering the market, understanding how importers and distributors work, how to find an importer, and some general information on the US market. We have our RF Binder Wines of Germany team joining us from the States, who will give you an insight of what we actually do, the Deutsche Weininstitut and Wines of Germany in the US. We have Robert, I don't know your last name, how to pronounce it, so I'll just leave it at that. But Atalanta will introduce you in a second. And we hope to have a lot of questions that you might have, but we also hope, of course, that we can answer a lot of questions prior to your asking them. Please use the chat room to ask any questions you have, and we will try to answer them at the end of this presentation. And if you have any specific questions for Robert, do feel free to put them in the question and answer part to get more replies on that one. And I want to inform you that you're being recorded, and the recording we will put it on our Deutsche Weine website, that you can have a look at it later again. And the presentation, which is being done by Robert and the Wines of Germany team, can be requested. We're happy to send that to you. Please turn off your microphones during the 1 hour webinar that we have now. And from this point, I'll pass on to Atalanta, hoping that I haven't forgotten anything major. So please, Atalanta, feel free to start the Wines of Germany part before we pass on to Cassidy and Robert.
Thank you, Carola. So as Carola mentioned, we were going to do quick introductions. We really wanted Robert to take you through the US wine market, its structure, market trends, and what you need to do in order to think about entering the market. And we'll give you a quick overview of our program, as well as answer questions. I'll just quickly introduce our Wines of Germany team here in the US. Bruce and I have worked with the Deutsche Weininstitut for now too many years to mention. But we oversee all of the activities in the US, and we have a team across both the US and different functions that supports our programming, from digital to on and off premise promotions, as well as media relations. Cassidy, I'll pass it to you who runs activities day to day, and will introduce Robert.
Yes, so my name is Cassidy Havens. I'm the Senior Director leading the day-to-day activities for Wines of Germany USA. I joined the team almost a year ago now. I started in December, but previously to that, I worked in wine, specifically public relations and communications, for about a decade. So I hold the WSET diploma, which I completed in 2017, and I'm currently a Stage 2 Master of Wine student. The rest of our team includes Megan Smith, who is based on the West Coast in California. She's our director overseeing our digital programs and our image campaign, as well as some influencer work. We also have Sophie Biviano, who is a director who oversees our press and trade programming. She handles our trips, our off-premise programming, and then some of our media mailings as well. We also have Alyssa Carino, who supports on the paid media side, Avery Dorita, who is a senior associate managing the ambassador program. She also helps with social media content creation, on-premise programming, and then our newsletter communications. And finally, we have Jacqueline Cosio, who is an associate supporting on our media program and then our info line. So I'll briefly introduce Robert, and Robert, please feel free to chime in on anything that I may miss. But we're very excited to have Robert Tobiasen join us today. Robert is the president of NABI, the National Association of Beverage Importers. He joined starting in October 2018. Previous to that, he worked with the United States Treasury Department on the alcohol, tobacco tax regulations, compliance investigations, and international trade matters. He was also the chief counsel for the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Trade Bureau from 2003 to 2012. So Robert, thank you very much. If you would like to add anything else on your background or what NABI does, we would love for you to do that.
Thank you, but that was a very kind introduction, Cassidy, and I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Did you have any additional comments, Cassidy, before I move in?
Nope,
to
I
my
just wanted
presentation.
Yeah,
Okay, sounds
not
good.
sure if you want to introduce your key learnings from the session, but after that, I'll stop sharing and you can go ahead into your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, it's great to be with you on your side of the pond and me on my side of the pond. Appreciate this opportunity to chat with you about the U.S. market. As you probably all know, the U.S. is generally the largest alcohol market in the alcohol beverage market in the United States, or in the country, in the world. As such, a market many foreign producers like to access. We have a interesting regulatory system that I find a number of people do find confusing. It's the three-tier system. To understand why we have that system, let me just take a brief detour down the road of history. Alcohol law, like a number of other situations, kind of reflects the culture of the country. It's a socially controversial commodity, but also a commodity of great pleasure. As such, in the United States, to understand our system, you have to understand why we had prohibition from 1920 to 1933 and why prohibition failed. We had prohibition because the producer side of the industry, the breweries, etc., owned retailers, they found ways to push more alcohol into the retail market for consumption than the market could reasonably consume. As a result, you had a lot of public drunkenness, you had family violence issues, you had lack of paycheck money going to the families, excuse me. You had a number of social problems. The lesson from prohibition, however, was that alcohol is, if you will, a necessary evil, and therefore it should be regulated in a fashion that allows its reasonable consumption, but also prevents its excess overconsumption. The three-tier system was designed to keep each segment of the distribution chain, from the supplier to the importer to the distributor to the retailer, to keep them as independent bodies, almost as a checks and balance against each other. Additionally, the states and the three-tier system is really set up under state law. It's not a federal government mandate. The federal government recognizes that it exists and regulates within that framework, but it is a state established system. So that's generally why we have it. It's not, overall, it's not that difficult to work with. And we'll talk about it perhaps during the question and answer time if you have additional questions. In this presentation, we're looking at a number of factors, and that is, what are the drivers in the US market today? We'll probably talk a little bit more about the three-tier system. We're going to look at how do you differentiate yourself? How do you find a way to penetrate this market by differentiating your products? and then what are some of the best practices in the current landscape to both market your product and to find importers. Because essentially in the US, the importer you'll have the contract with the importer who will bring in the product, clear customs, and send it to a wholesaler or a distributor. And those wholesalers and distributors in each state will market the product to the retailers, both the retailers on premise, on trade, or retailers at shops with takeaway options. Looking at the market today, I've been involved in this field for about 40 years, a little bit more, and the market has clearly changed, evolved over time. When I first started in this field, consumers had brand loyalty. There was one or two wineries that they would look for on a brand name. Some beers they would look for, some spirits they would look for by brand name. They also tended to be, you were either a beer drinker or a wine drinker or a spirits drinker. You didn't find people crossing the commodity lines that much. Excuse me. Fast forward to today, that all has changed. The notion of consumer loyalty in many ways is a dead concept. Consumers are looking for something new, different, exciting. And they will look for it in either both the shops for off-premise and the bars and pubs and restaurants. You have a younger consumer today who will cross product lines. If going out to dinner, he or she may start with a beer, have wine with the main course, and perhaps a brandy afterwards. Today's consumer is much more willing to move between products on the occasion. And that's important to remember. The occasion, consumers purchase for the occasion. It could be a graduation party. And in some cases, if it's a graduation party with younger people who are below the legal drinking age, they may want a non-alcoholic product or a low alcohol product at a minimum. On the other hand, you have people celebrating birthdays or wedding anniversaries and the like, christenings. You have occasions that you now have to look at. In terms, again, on the market, my age group, baby boomers, individuals born between 1946 and 1964, are your steady wine consumers, but we are dying out. The younger generation is starting to find some interest in wine, but they again are looking at all three commodities, all three product types. And there is a move toward lower alcohol and non-alcohol beverages for lower alcohol, non-alcoholic wines or spirits or beers for wellness concerns. What you look at today, which is also a very big change in the marketplace from the time I started, is the impact of social media. Through social media, you have a number of inexpensive advertising tools available to you. There are ways to reduce what we call market barriers. You don't need a huge advertising budget to enter the US market. You can use social media. But what you need when you enter the US market, you need to tell a story about your product, and that story has to be authentic. And I cannot stress enough what I mean by authentic. Consumers today are looking for something different. They're looking for quality over quantity. They the younger generation does not have a large disposable income, but they do have some. And beverage alcohol has been marketed as an affordable luxury. You know, you cannot afford that race car, or that sports car, but you can afford a very nice bottle of wine. Or if you're out for the weekend with friends, you can afford a few very nice craft beers, a few very glasses of a very fine wine, and the like. So you have a consumer who's looking at quality over quantity. They're not looking at what volume can they get. They're looking at what is the best quality I can afford with the amount of money I have to spend. In looking for those products, they're looking for why I should be attracted to your product. It may be a label, but most likely there's something more. The label might attract their attention, but they're really looking for a story about your product. They want to not only enjoy your product, but they want to feel good about enjoying your product. They want to feel that they are supporting the company, a business that either shares their values or is socially responsible, the like. So you need to tell a story, but it has to be an authentic story, because everybody uses these little lights, everything out truthfully. So you don't want to be the one who tells a false story and then and then someone checks it out and you get a bad review and it goes viral. You only have that one chance to protect your reputation. So social media is valuable, but again, as I mentioned, the premiumization trend continues. People do view alcohol beverages as an affordable luxury, something they can afford. There's a little bit of a downward trend in per capita consumption. I think part of that is because consumers are looking for quality over quantity. So they're still interested in consuming, but it's not, again, like when I was a younger person or in college, how much can I get? How many cans of beer or bottles of wine can I get for the money I have? They are definitely looking for quality. There's this preference again to moving to some lower alcohol products, which I think is very valuable for the German wine industry, because your Rieslings, for example, tend to be a lower alcohol by volume, lower ABV than a lot of wines produced in other countries. You also are dealing, though, again, with a consumer whose preferences may change overnight. There are a couple trends out of your control in this area, and those can be there can be a trade dispute. You all know the Airbus dispute and the challenges that the retaliatory tariffs imposed on wine imports from Germany, France, a number of other countries, Spain. Spirits were hit in other cases, like for Italy. Trade disputes are a little bit out of your control. There's the whole issue in the market here in the US about adult use cannabis, and will that be pulling consumers away from beverage alcohol? If so, does it draw consumers from beer or wine or spirits or all? That is still sorting itself out in the US marketplace. And then you simply have the completely unknown. I remember I was sitting at a meeting at the Italian embassy with a number of people from various wine producing countries in Europe during the Trump administration. And that morning, the president tweeted out that champagne should be tariffed immediately, because he was upset with the French about something at the time. So you never know what might be the unexpectancy. In terms of importing into the U.S., before going on to some of the legal issues, and I won't go on to that many of them because the importer will be handling a lot of the technical paperwork aspects. There will be one area I will come back to, which the foreign supplier's role is becoming more important in the U.S. In terms of imports. But the importers, many importing companies are still family businesses. They may be small, medium, or very large. I mean, the largest in the U.S., Southern Glacier Wine and Spirits, or Republican National, or Breakthrough Beverage, Ray's Family, Young Market. Those are still family companies, but they're very, very large family companies. The reason I mention the family nature of the company is there tend to be second, third generation, in some cases fourth generation family members. They figured out how they want to pick their wines for importation. They know they have their yardstick of what they look for. They have their business model as to what's worked for them. To the extent you can find out what is the corporate the culture of the company or the importer, that's helpful. You want to look at the brands they currently sell, and do they have a hole that they need to fill? Do they have a void? For example, you may have an importer who imports champagne and several sparkling wines, but you look at the brands and you realize they do not have a super premium. All of their 3 or 4 labels tend to be value brand or economy brands, or just kind of premium but not super premium. You're looking to see if they have a gap that you can market yourself as being able to fill in their range. And visiting their websites, it's great today. You can really see the wide range of offerings that various importers have. The importer also is, for a new product, is probably looking for a sharing program on promotion. They know, the importer knows it has to promote your product and build a market, and they look to you as a partner for doing that. What I mean by that is, hypothetically, or suppose you sell a case of wine to an importer for $100 a case. That importer may say, I will put $5 per case aside, and you put $5 per case aside. Of that $100, I'm charging you. We'll put 5 aside for your share, and develop a fund, a bank that can be used to help promote your product. Also, another way, and again, social media allows you to do this, is to create a demand in the market from consumers or retailers for your product. Because if you have consumers going to a retailer saying, I heard about this product, I heard about this brand of wine from Germany, I really want it, do you have it? And if not, how do you get it? I want you to get it for me. You can create a demand for your product from consumers, from retailers. The retailers then go to the wholesalers, who go to the importers and say, we need to get this brand. So you can use social media to create the demand for your product. The social media can be directed toward maybe distributors or wholesalers. It may be directed toward consumers or even retailers. But you look at how can I create a demand for my product? Generally, retail importers also want to make sure that you at least have a somewhat steady supply line, or they know exactly what quantity of wine they can expect your production to be in a year, so they can gauge their marketing. Obviously, the last thing you want to do is have a very successful product and run out of inventory too early. So those are different things you probably want to look at. As I said again, needing to differentiate your product. It may be that there's a unique characteristic you have, marketing your products, their characteristics, qualities. In marketing your products, you also need to, at least this is a trend I'm seeing, and I just pass it on for that value. Climate change is affecting and impacting the quality of the grapes. Vineyards in some places in Europe and Spain, for example, are being moved farther up the hillside to have cooler temperatures. In a number of countries in Europe this year, the harvest of the grapes was much earlier than expected. There are a number of factors, and obviously wildfires and smoke taint and smoke damage to grapes. Climate change is clearly impacting the grapes and thus the terroir and thus your wine, your characteristics, your flavor, aromas, tones. Many wineries have promoted themselves on producing a consistent product. They've developed a taste profile for the consumer that the consumer generally expects a 2018 vintage to taste like a 2020 vintage to taste like a 2022 vintage. And frequently that's done through blending of different varietals to reach that consistency of taste. That's becoming harder and harder and harder to do with all the weather changes and the impacts on the vineyards. So my feeling is that you should think about promoting your product as each year is unique, that we take what Mother Nature gives us, what we have, and we make the best product from those grapes, from the conditions, the natural conditions that we have had this year. So do not expect my vintages to be consistent and taste the same each year. What I am offering you is a fine, high quality product. I'm almost an artisan, the artist. You're creating the best presentation for each year from the characteristics of the grapes, the terroir, the rainfall and the droughts and the like. I think those are most of the marketing points I want to cover. I just want to cover a few legal matters, and then we can, I'll turn it over to my colleagues for questions from you all. Generally, there are a lot of licensing requirements. Importers need federal licenses, state licenses. They pay the federal tax at the time of importation in most cases. The wholesalers will pay the state taxes rather than the importer paying the state taxes. There are some importers who also have independent wholesale operations. Southern Glacier and those other companies do have import divisions as well as wholesale divisions in states where that is allowed. The importer is responsible for getting a label approval from TTB, the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, which is the principal regulator of beverage alcohol at the federal level. All imported products need an approved label. We call it the COLA, Certificate of Label Approval, COLA. Some wines require a formula if they're a specialty wine, a flavored wine, but your natural wines generally do not require formula approvals. The basic purpose for the formula approval is to make sure the ingredients, the added ingredients, are safe and that the final product is properly classified as a wine or a beer or a spirit. We do find some of those category lines getting very unclear these days, particularly in the beer area, and a little bit in some of the flavored wine areas. The importer will, I say, pretty much handle the paperwork issues and work with the customs broker to get your product cleared. Likewise, the distributors know the requirements under state law. There are brand registration requirements under state law. Each state where there's an annual fee for the opportunity, shall we say, to sell that brand of wine or spirit or beer in that state. Distributors, again, know all these requirements. All of this information is in a handout that you will receive, and there's contact information for me if you have additional questions about it that we do not get to. The final thing I want to mention is the Craft Beverage Modernization Act, or we call it the CBMA, the Craft Beverage Modernization Act. It was first went into effect in 2018. It continues in effect. It was initially enacted into law for 1 year at a time, but it is last in December of they made it permanent. So 21, 22, it has been permanent. It essentially gives a tax credit on imported wine, and it gives a reduced rate of tax for spirits and beer. There are quantity limitations. So, for example, the first for wine, there's a cap of 750,000 gallons on the CBMA tax credit for the first 30,000. The basic tax on still wine in the United States is $1.07 a gallon. Under the CBMA, for the first 30,000 gallons, you get a $1 credit. For the next 100,000 gallons, you get a 90-cent credit. And then for the balance up to 750,000 gallons, you get 53.5 cents. And there are different rates for sparkling wines and the like, but the domestic producers have received this credit for many years, many decades, for beer and wine, but foreign suppliers did not and importers did not. As part of this CBMA, it was extended to imported products. What it has resulted in is a fairly complex mechanism for claiming that. As the foreign supplier, you are entitled, you hold the credit, but only your importer can claim that credit. Mentioning this now because on January 1 of 2023, the system is going to change on how the tax credit is taken. Up until now, the tax credit has been taken at the time the wine enters the United States and clears customs. From January 1 going forward, the importer will pay the full rate, the full tax rate, and then on a quarterly basis, file a claim for the dollar amount of the CBMA tax credit. And they'll be filing that with TTB and not customs. TTB has proposed regulations out on the system that will go into effect on January 1. A lot of those steps today will require foreign suppliers to input information online through a dedicated portal about their wine production, their assignments of the credits to importers. And importers will also use that system to claim the credit, the dollar amount of the credit. I mention it because thus far, as I've said, the importers have, under the earlier systems, the importers handle virtually all of the paperwork containing the information from the foreign supplier that was needed. Now, TTB is going to be looking to the foreign supplier to provide that directly to TTB online. And the foreign supplier has to have a point of contact available to TTB should any questions arise. There'll be more of that coming out. The proposed regulations were issued about a week ago, and we will be getting information out on them. With that, let me return it to Cassidy and my colleagues, and I'm more than glad to answer any questions or attempt to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Robert. Before any questions, we'll just briefly go through our Wines of Germany programming. So I will share my screen. Okay. So Atalanta will walk us through the US market strategy.
Yes, thank you, Cassidy. And so to build on Robert's points about creating connections with consumers as well as trade and retailers, one of the key pieces that we've looked at from the US market strategy is how to create an image and an emotional connections between German wines and US consumers. And so if you look at our market strategy as we've been changing and evolving the image of German wines. So a lot of what we've worked on is how do we get consumers, retailers, on and off premise partners to really understand that Germany is one of the world's most important winemaking countries. We've been very fortunate in having among the trade very passionate German wine aficionados and fans who really have embraced it. And so what we really work with is passionate and knowledgeable brand ambassadors in the market to drive that engagement, both online and in person. And those we focused on key markets where German wines sell, as well as emerging markets. So Milwaukee, North and South Carolina, but also obviously the big markets like Texas and New York. To the point of creating some emotional connections with consumers and getting them to understand what German wines stand for today, working on digital and social media and creating lifestyle content that appeals to their shifting styles and trends. As Robert mentioned, consumers today have a lot of different interests, have a lot of different consumption habits, and we've really tried to not only create connections with them, but also showcase the depth and breadth and the range of styles that German wines have to give them the opportunity to try in different ways. I'd say the other piece is with the shift over COVID to a lot of off-premise shopping, so in retail versus in restaurants, we've really developed some key strategic partnerships with major retailers. And that is so that they also are driving that recommendation, putting placements of German wines and educating their staff so that they recommend German wines at retail. And that's been both, again, online in person. We've finally started the in-person tastings again, so people get to try the wonders that is German wines. And the last two pieces that I think are, you know, what we call a little bit behind the scenes, but equally important, is to engage the trade, and that is through trips, conferences, and seminars, but really get them to, as a younger trade audience has come into the market, get them to appreciate German wines the same way some of their older colleagues have, and really see the breadth of German wines. And sometimes it's just about making sure that you're in the conversations. And so we've done a lot of engagement of both traditional and new media to ensure that German wines get their fair visibility when it comes to these trends and how they respond. So you'll see that we've seen a lot of coverage of German wines in the media. There's some new players in the market, to Robert's point about the lower alcohol, and so things of that nature have really helped show a different image of German wines. As we talked about, these are the programs that we carry out throughout the year across the US. So it's a fairly broad program, but working with both national and regional retailers to do in-store tasting and education. We engage with restaurants and sommeliers and how they fit into their different restaurants. And we've done an ambassador program for the last couple of years in key markets in the US. Consumer events when we can, to really get consumers to try wine directly. A large social and digital program. We spotlight winemakers. We give them seasonal 5 to try recommendations. We create digital advertising to build a different image of German wine. We just finished a campaign called Prost to Summer that really got everybody celebrating what are life's little moments with German wines. Earned media, as I mentioned, and then these last pieces are really to change the image that we work with and the people that we work with. So an image campaign to really drive that awareness and create a vibrant image of German wines. Paid media and influencers, so working with influencers to get them to carry our message and reach consumers directly. Trips, which are, I think, coming back, but have definitely been a struggle given the last couple of years. And then we serve as an info bureau for requests that come in from people who have questions about either entering the US market or are looking for winemakers to introduce them to. So with that, Cassie, maybe you want to kind of wrap up some of the key successes that we've seen for the US market, and we can open the Q&A.
Yep, absolutely. So as Robert mentioned, you will get this presentation, which has a lot of detail of what he's already discussed. But just to summarize, we have the multi-tier system here in the US. So you, the non-US producer, you go through an importer. The importer then sells its wine to distributors. The distributors sell their wines to the on and off premise trade, and then that eventually gets to the consumer. And the most important thing here is to note that taxes must be collected at each tier. So we do have a pricing structure example. So let's say that you have a bottle that sells X seller at 250 euros. If we're looking at a 1-to-1 exchange rate, that would be coming into the US market at $2.50. The case price for that would be roughly $30. The transport tax, so that will be paid to the Port of New Jersey, roughly $12. Then the total cost laid to New Jersey importer would be $32. Then your margin for that would be marked up 33%. So the distributor cost would then be almost $43. And then if you include transportation in that, it's almost $45. That gets a further markup, 33%. So the cost of the case to the trade would be about $55. And then if you break that down, your wine is almost, let's see, 3 times the price it should be. So $6.27. And typically, if this is sold at a retailer, they will round the SRP up so that it's a nice number right below $7 at $6.99. And if this wine would be sold to an on-premise restaurant, they would mark it up a further 3 times. So your wine that costs $2.50 would then be a $22 bottle at a restaurant. So some factors to consider before entering the US market: clearly define your objectives and goals, and that is your financial goals and your case volume goals. As Robert mentioned, if you have an extremely popular product, you don't want to run out of stock on that. Also understand the opportunities that exist in the US market. So like Robert said, looking at importers to see where you can fill a gap. So the types of products, whether that's the variety, the style, the packaging, also the price point, and then the quantities produced and available on an ongoing basis. A great example of that is we all hear about the champagne shortages every year. If you have a Sekt in your portfolio, it's a great opportunity to position that as a great alternative. And successful long-term presence in the US market requires the right products, the right partners. So making sure that you have an importer that shares the same vision as you, and you have a good relationship and active communication with them. Continuity of product supply, stable prices, and regular visits to the market. That's extremely important to visit the market and really see how people are consuming wine here and the ways that they're selling it. So I'll briefly go through this because we're getting short on time, and I know that we want to get to the Q&A, but just understanding how an importer and distributor operates. There are different kinds of importers and distributors. Some are more spirits and liquor driven companies with wine divisions. Others are integrated wine and spirits companies where they have, product knowledge and they really focus on fine quality. And then there are also wine-only companies that tend to be smaller and more focused on smaller producers. Ways to find the US importer. So you can reach out to us at our info line. We're always happy to help with recommendations. When you do that, provide information about your winery and your goals, also to us and the Deutsche Weininstitut, and then cultivate relationships with industry gatekeepers. And building a strong relationship is very important. So these are things that I've already talked about, but another important point, just going back to what Robert said, make sure to create a marketing budget and monitor results with your partner. And again, visit the market as often as possible. So now we will open it up to a Q&A. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand. We're happy to answer them.
Nonetheless, I mean, if you do have questions, feel that something is unclear or that you need to know something which we haven't mentioned yet, do feel free to contact us here in Germany. My name is Carola Keller. I'm in charge for the US market, or the RF Finder team, represented by Atalanta and Cassidy and Robert Tobiasen. I got the name now. We're all waiting for and hoping to help you in any way we can. If you want to have a look at the recording that we took, we're going to put it on the export portal of www.deutscheweine.de. And any other issues that you may have, especially the TTP thing that starts on January 1st, that Robert mentioned, we're going to put an update on our website. So anything that we get, you can find there. But please do feel free to contact us here. The presentation, I saw there was some slight things that need to be updated. If you wanted to give us a call, give us a shout. We're happy to share that one with you. And there are no questions at this point.
I saw, Carola, I saw 2 people raise their hand.
Okay, I didn't. So where are they?
Well, it looks like you just raised your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't want to do that. I'm sorry. Just take it down again.
So there's one that...
Let me have a quick look.
Monica from Weingut.
Yeah.
Bibu.
So Monica, I know that you had a question, you raised your hand, and we'll get to the others who also raised their hand, but if you would like to go ahead and ask.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that the chat function is not available. So I just want to make sure that people don't want to ask questions via the chat function.
Okay.
So just in case you don't know, the chat function is not working.
Okay, so we have to raise your hand.
Monica, this is Robert. Are you the same Monica who I knew through the OIV?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, just thought I'd check to make sure.
Okay, so somebody else wants to raise their hand if the chat function is not working for whatever reason?
Yes, I saw that some raised their hand, but I can't see your hands raised now. So if you want to raise them again, we'll answer your questions.
Okay, so the chat is online again. Nope. Okay.
Maybe if I might, Carola, take this opportunity to make maybe just one or two short points since we have a minute or so. The world after COVID is obviously changing, and trying to gauge that market is also challenging. But I think there are a few takeaways that you may want to keep in mind as you develop your promotional programs. First is during the COVID shutdowns, a lot of people realize they are good chefs and they love to make gourmet meals at home. And they have continued to do that. Now, I know very few people who have a live-in sommelier. So you have to become their online sommelier. You have to help them figure out what wine to buy in the shop to pair with their marvelous dinner that they've made as a new chef in their family. And so it's becoming, I think, very important in some of your promotional material now to link into pairing, because consumers may have become home chefs, but they have not become home sommeliers. So there's a market there. Also, restaurants, and I'm thinking about the white tablecloth linen restaurants. They tend to be the market for the super premium wines. Many of those restaurants sold off their wine collections during COVID because they needed cash to simply stay alive as a business. Some of them are restocking, but a lot of them are restocking much more cautiously. So that market may again be a little difficult to break into as easily as it was before. Again, it's a market there, but you have more people being home chefs, and you have the restaurants not wanting to spend the capital to rebuild that collection. So
Robert, we have a couple of questions in the chat, if that's okay. So first, is wine in cans a trend? And just anecdotally, yes, it is. And it's from a sustainability standpoint and also from a convenience standpoint. Robert, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add to that.
This is a great time to be thinking about your packaging. Packaging in every front, because of carbon footprints, is out there in the public debate, public discussion. So if you wanted to try a can or another interesting, creative, innovative package, this is the time to do it. Consumers are almost expecting to see those types of changes in the marketplace. So, I mean, they're acceptable. I think there'll be certain wines which will always be in bottles far too heavy to ship, but it's still shipped because of bottling at the source requirements. But consumers are still looking at the liquid in the container. They're not as impressed by the container as they were before. And just one other real quick thing, because you mentioned the Sekt and the champagne shortage. You want to figure out how to create the market for Sekt that the Italians created for Prosecco. I mean, that was all marketing. And you know, Prosecco was a grape type until it became so popular, then they changed it to a GI and all those other wonderful things. But you want to figure out how do you educate consumers that your Sekt is just as good as the Proseccos and many of the French sparkling wines.
Great. And then Max had a question about advertising homepages and shops via QR codes on the labels. Any regulations for that? Does the label need any warning signs? So this is a bottling or labeling question. So any regulations for labels? Yes,
and I recommend you, when you have time, go to the ttb.gov website, ttb.gov. I think it's in the handout as well. And look up labeling. They have tutorials on labeling. They have a lot of information because labeling can be very tricky. There is what we call mandatory information, the brand name, country of origin, alcohol content. There's certain mandatory elements of mandatory information. In terms of warning, the major warning is what we call the government health warning, which essentially says that that drinking alcohol and driving a car operating complex equipment, or if you're pregnant, is not a good idea. That's a standard statement. It has to be on all containers of beverage alcohol in the US that have at least 0.5 of 1% alcohol by volume. As I say, the TTB website has a lot of labeling information, the do's and don'ts. There are times you can make it, there are 40 situations where you can make a change to a label and not be required to submit a new label. And there's actually a tool where you can check online to see if I make this change, do I need to submit a new cola? So there's a great deal of information. I know right now the EU is looking at nutritional labeling and the like, and some QR codes. In the United States, TTB has something called the Serving Facts Panel, and you can find information about it on the TTB webpage. The Serving Facts Panel is the closest thing we have to a nutritional panel. But you have to, if you're going to put calories, if you're going to put carbohydrates, protein, information on the label, of those elements, you have to do it in the format that is laid out in the TTB guidance on the website. QR codes are permissible, but make sure that the information that it takes you to is consistent with the regulations.
Great. So Christine also had a question about the average price for a wine bottle from Germany in restaurants and shops. From my experience, it's a little hard to say. It really depends on what type of restaurant it is and what type of wine shop it is. I think more specialized, smaller wine shops where they're carrying more fine wine, your average price could be between $30 to $50 US, possibly more. At a very fine restaurant, your average bottle price on the list could be $100 to $150, depending on their quality and their wine list. So it's difficult to say, but Christine, if you would like to send us your question to our info line, we can give you a little bit more info there. There's also a question about, is there a list of importers I can contact and what's the best way to get in touch? So yes, you can email our info line. The email will be in the handout that we provide, but we can provide you with a list of importers and some recommendations. And then could you please give us more information on the use of biodynamic wine on the label? Right now, it looks like only Demeter certified wineries are allowed to use those terms. And I think this will be our last question. But Robert, any insight on biodynamic wine?
There are a lot of label claims from organic on down, and biodynamics is one of them. I don't, if you go to the TTV webpage and type that in the search, biodynamics in the search, I think you'll come up with the most current guidance. I believe there needs to be a stand. If you have to show that you're certified to meet the standard. But again, there are a lot of some designations are considered puffery and others are considered, factual, shall we say. And for biodynamics, I'm not completely off the top of my head sure of all the requirements, but I know you can find that on the website. I can look up some information and send an email to you guys, and you can find a way to distribute it to the audience.
Yep. Perfect. Well, great. I think that's all of the time that we have. Thank you so much, Robert, for lending your expertise. We really appreciate it. And thank you to Carola and the DWI for organizing.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
And thank you to all our listeners, and hope you got some information that helps you with the US market. But do feel free to contact us if you have need for more information. Have a good day. Thank you very much to our team. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.